Okay, I've got us at 9:31.
Oh, we're in trouble.
We're a minute late.
Tim was feeling rather coolish.
Friday.
It is rather cool out there.
Feels good.
Okay, let's begin.
It's cool.
We have several that are out. Shorty and Teresa stopped in Oklahoma City to spend the night on their way home, and Diana and Karen, I don't know where they ended up spending the night. They stopped somewhere and spent the night, so they're on the way home this morning. Chris and I came home yesterday. I slept, except for the first couple of hours. Chris got us the rest of the way home. For which I was very grateful. Had a good trip. Donna anybody involved was a little overwhelmed that we could go from one point to the next in 12 days, but there were just so many signs of supernatural effort, supernatural result, because I'd have been the prayer, let whatever our hands do, just let the work be more than what it should be. And that's certainly what happened. We got everything done down to the finished plumbing, which the plumber will have to come back and do, and the flooring. And like I said, most of that went down yesterday. So, but just a lot of challenges, a lot of overcoming some unexpected difficulties, a lot of trips to the lumberyard. It's hard to take everything you thought you might need. And so we were Clay and Rick, their son-in-law, were just a tremendous help. We didn't expect to do anything to the outside, but the outside was all cleaned and now ready to paint. They got a painter coming to paint the outside. So just really very much a supernatural result as you stand back after 12 days and see all that was done. Chris is just remarkable at being able to answer questions, because all day long he was trying to work, and it was, hey Chris, can you come look at this? And we never wanted him to come look. We wanted him to bring his hammer and he would do. So we were building a new front porch we started about 3:00 on Friday afternoon, and we wrapped up everything that we had planned to do at 10:30 on Saturday night. So that was the longest of our days. That was 14.5-hour day, but we had some very tired people, but very glad that we were able to do all that needed to be done. So I want to ask you.
Is it where they can move in?
No, when they get the carpet down, there were so many decisions that had to be made, things that we thought would work when we got there and actually started. The little area where she's going to put the stackable washer and dryer and the pantry and that stuff, we just weren't able to do it the way we thought. So a lot of that had to be redone. The plumbers had not taken into consideration that we were going to vault all the ceilings. That was a remarkable effort and a beautiful job, because the ceilings are only about this high. And so we vaulted them all. And so now the center of the living room is about probably 9.5 feet. The bedroom's ceiling is 9 feet. So really made the house look bigger. But
It's hard to clean though.
yeah, it's just a different problem there.
I got teenage boys with their own mothers.
Because when we tore that ceiling down, I think that house was built they're estimating like in 1946. There was no sand in the ceiling like there is here, because here you're going to get piles of it.
Yeah.
None. I mean, the installation was there, but no dust, no dirt.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's pretty drastically different, but you're dealing with a lot of rock because it stays wet. So,
Wow.
but I wish y'all would have been there.
I prayed lots for y'all.
We would have gotten through perhaps a lot sooner, or found some more to do. But it was interesting and quite a mission
as
trip.
much help as I was when we were at Las Cruces, so I'm a few years older than you.
But every one of us felt the years older. There was no doubt about that. I want to share something this morning. I think kind of having the perspective that we have had for the last few weeks and being around different people and you see situations come up and how those situations are handled. And I got reminded pretty often throughout the 2 weeks that some of the things that we saw and heard would turn into Sunday school lessons. And so here they are. I'm not going to read it, but you remember in the scripture where the disciples were walking along with Jesus and they saw someone that was sick or ailing of something. I can't remember what in the story it was, but they asked who did something wrong. Was it his parents? Was it him? And Jesus was very quick to say, no one did anything wrong. And I love that, because we're very quick to do what the disciples did. We're very quick to try to make that assessment. And I have found that assessment has become increasingly destructive. It's robbing Christian people of immense joy, of immense peace. Because when they saw this situation, when they saw this person, the thing that I realized was that which is robbing us and stealing so much from us is that we have been taught, even within the bounds of where it should not have been taught, we have been taught the privilege of measurement, of measuring. In another one of those stories, I keep hitting my phone up because I'm trying to see who's texting, but I had so little time to prepare formally. My notes are right here. So if I'm looking down at my phone, I'm not trying to call somebody or see who's texting me. We saw in season 2 of The Chosen, and especially in the second and third of those episodes that are out, we see the disciples that are arguing. It becomes very real. It becomes very powerful to watch the interaction between the disciples and realize that they didn't know each other and in many ways didn't like each other, and they were competing for position, for honor. Who had Jesus's ear? Who had his time? Who had his attention? Whose suggestions would he take? We know that to be true. We know it to be true from the beginning, but we also know that it's true all the way up to the end when they were having the Last Supper before the crucifixion, that they were still comparing. Peter was still a bit upset because John would sit at Jesus' right hand. So it never went away. But I found in this story what I've taught so many times about the destructive nature of comparison. But what the Lord began to show me was that there's a powerful difference between the damage that comparison does and the damage that measurement does. They're not the same thing. And I have spoken often and frequently, and even not so long ago, about the damage of comparison. And we are, again, notorious for comparing. And it, too, is robbing us of joy. It's robbing us of peace. It's robbing us of just really happiness. Again, we ought to be the happiest people in the world, and it ought to take an amazing blow to remove happiness from us. And I don't like the fact that people say, well, it's really not about happiness, it's about joy. Look it up. See how many times joy is mentioned. Look at how many times happiness is mentioned, and you're gonna realize happiness is going to give it a run for its money, because we're designed to be happy, and we're designed to be happy, and happiness always comes out of gratitude. And gratitude comes out of the fact that we were given a gift that was both personal and valuable that will make you happy. Again, if I sent Lorinda a bag of rocks, it would be a gift. It just probably wouldn't be very valuable.
I know those rocks.
Well, these are caliche rocks.
Oh, okay.
In this, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. She wouldn't want one of those other kind of rocks either.
probably not.
Probably not. But when the gift is valuable and when it is personal, there's an instant gratitude and happiness will come naturally. You watch somebody open a gift and they see in it something that's valuable and personal to them, meaningful to them, and it's very difficult not to be happy. And when I ever come to the realization that the breath I'm taking in right now is given to me as a gift, it's valuable, it's personal. The next minute on the clock that I haven't experienced yet is given to me as a gift. It's valuable and it's personal, and it ought to, in the very nature of our life, create happiness. Something is robbing us, and we shouldn't stand for it. We shouldn't put up with it. We're happy people. We're kind people. We're loving people by the very nature of Jesus who now lives in us, this divine nature. We are happy people, and I don't see many that are happy people. They're down about one thing or they're down about another. Why? Because either they're comparing or they're measuring. We need to know the difference in the two. So I want you to go with me to 2 Corinthians chapter 10, and we're going to read for just a moment, and I'll get into this topic. The 2 Corinthians chapter 10 is one of those chapters that, because of what's in the front end of it, we often don't look at what's at the tail end of it. 2 Corinthians chapter 10 is one of those passages that we truly have taught well. I've taught them over and over those verses that begin in verse 3 that says, "For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh, for the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ, and having in a readiness to revenge all disobedience when your disobedience is fulfilled." So we use those verses, we teach those verses. They're pulled into sermons and lessons often, but it's there we need to continue, because I would venture to say that very few of us could, sitting here today, say, okay, I know what comes next. We haven't been really taught much about what comes next in this passage. So we're going to just continue right there in verse 7 for a little ways. Do you look on things after the outward appearance? What's the basis of most comparison? We're talking two things here. What's the basis of most comparison? Yeah, we're looking on the outward appearance. We're making assessments based on what we can see. When rarely will we ever get that right. We were in Grandview and in the Kansas City area where we were. I noticed, and I'm sure some piece of this is connected to the pandemic, but there just weren't many friendly people. But if you engaged them, they became immensely friendly. I went into some of those lumber yards so many times, and they would ask me, "What are you working on?" And I'd say, "Well, we came from Texas to do a renovation of a house for my sister." And it was like they would have told you anything that you asked, connections instantly. And in one of the stores in particular, the people were just tremendously friendly. But it was interesting that how quickly we made assessments based on an outward appearance. I don't know their stories. I don't know what they faced that day. I don't know what the Lord's doing in them. I don't know most of what I would need to know, even if I could make an assessment. I don't know those things. So we're using the outward appearance to make these assessments, and they're unfair, and they're unjust, and they are not only affecting perhaps our influence on the other person, we're breeding within ourselves this disdain for the situations that we see, and somehow feel right in doing it.
And it's even like when you go to a cash register or anything, and like something messes up, and the lady's like, I'm so sorry, because they're so used to people being so hateful to them. And I'm like, I'm the person that wants to go to the trainer or wants to get the new. So I'm like, I don't care, mess up all day long. They're like, you're so. I'm like,
And I'll tell you, from being on the other side of that for many, many years, you don't have many people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that's what I'm like,
Yeah.
you know. And I'm like, they're like, you're okay. I'm like, dude, I don't care.
I went to one Lowe's, and Donna had done a lot of the pre-buying, so we had a lot of the stuff there, material there. And the first time I was in there, a lady was checking me out, and I said, I just started. I said something about, I sure would like to know who's running this store. And I'd given her a receipt because I was taking something back. And she looked at the receipt and she said, "Oh, it's immediately on the defense." It was like, this was bought at another store. I mean, it was quick. And I said, I'd like to know because I really would like to thank them. They have been so kind to her. Got a whole new lady.
Yeah.
Complete change. And you realize why the defensiveness was there. Yeah, they've been attacked so many times because of something that's happening. And it was just amazing to watch the impact of nothing more than kindness.
And there aren't many bosses that don't also
Yeah,
don't even see. So some people have gotten it from both sides of the counter.
yeah. So they live each day in that place of uncertainty, and it's unfair. Let's continue in verse 7. Do you look on things after the outward appearance? If any man trust to himself that he is Christ, let him of himself think this again, that as he is Christ, even so are we Christ. What would have happened if Jesus would have looked on the outward appearance? Whom would he have loved? We saw the result of that from the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They love themselves. He's saying here, since we belong to Christ, we are his, then we too don't look on the outward things. We too don't make assessments on outward things. For though I should boast somewhat more of our authority, which the Lord hath given us for edification and not for your destruction, I should not be ashamed, that I may not seem as if I would terrify you by letters. For his letters, say they, are weighty and powerful, but his bodily presence is weak and his speech contemptible. Let such one think this, that such as we are in word by letters, when we are absent, such we will also be indeed when we are present. And listen to this, verse 12. For we dare not make ourselves of the number, or compare ourselves with some that commend themselves, but they, measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves, are not wise. So we hear this story of comparing and measuring. So what is the difference? Comparing requires what? If I'm going to compare, what's needed for the comparison? Someone. The real key in comparing is someone. Someone who has, someone who who doesn't have, someone who's smarter, someone who's this, someone who's this. Comparison generally rests in the comparing of like things. So comparing a person to a person, or comparing a church to a church, or comparing a pastor to a pastor, or a teacher to a teacher. That's comparison. It happens between like things. Measuring happens within me. It requires no one else. And this is why it's so destructive. We see evidently the reality of comparison, but what I'm actually doing, the judgment that's involved in comparing myself to someone else and seeing that they have more, or seeing that they have less, or seeing that they're more gifted, or seeing that they're less gifted, whatever the basis of those comparisons are, is going to be destructive. And I have noticed that comparing, I wish I had something to write on, but you get this in your heads or write it down in your notes. Comparison leaves us with a critical spirit. You feel the criticism that happens just in the assessment. It truly leaves a critical spirit, because then I'm going to speak openly and outwardly about what I see in the other person. We even have to do this carefully when we compliment, because we can build somebody up in an area where they shouldn't be built up, and it still does the same thing. Sometimes when, I realize I've overstated something with no intentions of any detriment, but you realize the outcome could be the same. It could be hurt somewhere down the line. But the worst one is in the comparison when you see someone as less, or you even see someone that you see that is better, because it will leave you with a critical spirit. Measuring says, okay, let me just ask this. If we're going to measure, compare requires a person. If I'm going to measure in the most basic and simple terms, what does it require?
A tape measure.
A tape measure. And there's a lot of difference. When I reach and grab a tape measure and I got the wrong one, it's in metric. It doesn't quite compute as well. And even the tape measures, when you get them and you buy them and you're not careful, some tape measures will give you 1 through 12, and then they'll start over with 3 feet, 1 through 12. And doing carpentry work for all of my life, you kind of want the total. You want it to say 104 inches or 57 inches or whatever it happens to be. If you don't, you have to look at 3 feet, this much. So there's a lot of difference in tape measures. You can get them in rulers, but they come in amazingly different forms within us, because where a comparison took a person, a measurement took some type of an invisible measure you've created within yourself against some standard that you hold, that somebody's not doing it up to the way you would want it done, or somebody's making mistakes that you wish they wouldn't make, or that you wouldn't make. You're not comparing them to anybody else. You're comparing someone, measuring someone against some kind of a standard that you have in your head. And this is the one we don't ever talk about. This is the one that we rarely speak of, because we don't often like to admit the rulers that we're carrying around with us. And how many rulers should we have of any kind? How many should we have? No, none. Well, that's close enough. Yeah. That's the one I'd give you.
Okay.
The difference is, if we were to hold Jesus up, we're going to misuse him too. Because I can create a ruler out of him and say they're supposed to be acting like this.
I think as parents, we do it the biggest. Like, and I know I personally just, because I didn't birth my children, I want my kids to be this high and I want to be like this and I want to do this. And now it's the biggest thing. Oh, my kid's not doing the sports and he's not doing this and he doesn't want to do this. And he doesn't want to do this. I'm just like, I failed as a mom.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, does it matter if he doesn't do his work?
Like we talked about it here a few weeks ago. If your kid came home with an A in English and a B in science and a B in social studies and an F in math, where are you going to put all the effort? F in math. Where should you put the effort? In the A in English. Because they're already telling you, this is my natural bent. This is what fits me. It's something that Andrew Clark had shared with me a few weeks ago. The A is saying, this fits this kid. Help them get the F to a C. Help them pass it. But you focus on that A because they're gifted there. They've got exceptional talent there. But how many times will that be neglected because the standard is straight A's? And it's an imaginary standard set in high and lofty places. This is what we're shooting for. The reality is, focus on the A. Let the kid excel. Let the C be okay. But the standards, these artificial standards about behavior, about the way situations should go, it was amazing to watch for 12 days how little offense there was, among people who were working really hard. You'd see it every now and then, but then you'd recognize in 5 minutes it was gone. It's just some of that supernatural reality, because when you're working that close and you've got people who are masters at it and people who are novices at it, that's a prime source of offense. Because there's an artificial standard being set. It's very easy to do. But the reality is, we should be extremely difficult to offend. Amazingly happy people, difficult to offend, because it says so plainly that the reason that we're not offended is because the only standard is that really at play, if we were to have one, as Johnny suggests, it's not even Christ. It's Christ in me. So that he's producing the discernment, not the assessments. He will give clarity and truth so that then the words that we speak and the actions we take will be according to what he sees, according to his eyes, according to that which he recognizes. And it will dynamically change the nature of our heart. Because as I said earlier, that comparison creates a critical spirit, measuring creates a negative spirit. We will become amazingly negative when these standards run in our head, because how many people will often meet them? And rarely will they exceed them. Everybody's kind of primed to let us down. Because the standard I held was not met. Creates a negative spirit. Jan shared in church a few weeks ago how the Lord had dealt with that with her. Going to Kansas City, Teresa shared, and I'll let her share her own story. But she shared a powerful encounter she had with God when he removed the negativity from her recently. But it's amazing. Where does the negative spirit come from? And why has it so captured the Christian life? It's because we've allowed measurement to become our norm. We've been taught it. And I'm not advocating against it, but the education system is built on not only on comparison, that's done too, unfortunately. It's done on these measures.
Yeah, you're number one, you're number two, you're
Sure.
and my kids are like, Mom, you're not mad? I'm like, dude, I'm just happy you're passing. I don't care. Like, yeah, you got a 70.
The workplace does it.
Oh, yeah.
We have been taught, but we've been taught it in here. We've been taught within the religious spirit to make those comparisons, to make those measurements. The Pharisees were constantly at it. And again, that's just one of the reasons I like The Chosen so much, is because they're bewildered by Jesus. Just think about this, and just in the last episodes that we've seen, the last three of The Chosen, we don't see Jesus comparing, we don't see him measure. I mean, again, one of my favorite scenes, and it's an odd one, is him under that cart working on the axle. And the guy saying, you need to open a shop. You have a good business here. But he gets out from under that cart and he dusts himself off. I love that moment because nothing was beneath him.
Related to where people were.
Yeah, and you can't do that by comparing. You can't do that by measuring. Even his disciples, he knew each one and how to bring them into the new moment. James and John are trying to figure out why they had to plow the field or got to plow the field. They don't know which one it is. Was he rewarding us or was he testing us? Did we get to plow it? Did he make us plow it? Is it punishment? They were making all the assessments, trying to figure out what really happened here. And they sure weren't happy when they realized it was about ministering to a man they didn't like, a Samaritan. We watch it unfold here, not as something we encourage, but something that we resist. Because here's the real key. What is the medicine we take to stop it? What's the name written across the pill that he wants us to receive to stop it? We've been taught it all of our lives as an amazing thing. But a practical reality that stops the measurement, stops the comparison, is this word, grace. Grace is the answer. It stops all measuring. I don't need to share the critical word. I don't need to share from that negative spirit, the critical spirit. I don't need to share from there. I shouldn't share from there, because what did it take for him to cover any view he had of me? Grace stopped his comparing of me, his assessment of me, his judging of me, all stopped under this word grace. Perhaps mercy should go in there before it. But on a day-to-day basis, the reason that we don't compare, the reason that we're not critical, the reason that we should at least be mindful of it when it starts within us, is the recognition of the grace he showed us. What really happened at the cross, what really changed in that moment, that grace moment that simply lets us recognize that if he's going to forgive me so much and establish a view of me, not just forgive me, but establish his view of me that says there's not a single way that you can mess up that's going to change my thought about you. There's not a single thing that you could say, any measurement that you might have missed, any comparison that you might try to do that's not covered by the grace that I've shown you, because I knew all those things about you when I chose you. I knew every one of those things about you. When you became my child, I knew it. And I knew that those problems weren't over. But I chose you every day, and it's because of the grace of God that we get to live in this freedom today in a relationship with him. But I will tell you, and as I've shared with you before, and I pray that you would take this to heart. If God extended grace to us, and grace then is not extended from us, we have to rename it. It cannot be grace. Grace, by the very nature of grace, if I'm going to claim he gave me grace, it's in my hands now. I'm either going to have to let grace do what grace does and be extended to those around me to stop the critical and the negative spirit and to show grace to them, even in difficult moments, or I'm going to have to rename it something else. Because the grace that he gave us, the grace that he showed us, that he exposed to us and gave to us as a gift, if it's not going to do the same thing with those around us, we better rename it. Because grace, by the very nature of grace, is going to be extended to those around us.
Lynn Kane lived by that.
Hmm.
She always, whatever I was fussing about, whatever it was, she would say, just gesture. Give grace.
Yeah.
Give grace. All she would say, you knew exactly what she meant.
Yeah. Because it stops all the other. It's kind of hard to speak past it. Yeah.
It shuts you up.
Yeah. Grace was given to me. That's why I can do this, because it's here. But if I don't extend it, it's not here. It's grace by the very night. But the key for me, what is so important to me is I watch so many Christian people be unhappy. I don't understand it. I'm not a bubbly, I don't have this bubbly personality. I'm not the life of the party. But for the most part, I live happy. It's taken many years to get here. It's taken many years to understand. Well, even in one of the latest ones, when God told me, I'm not going to give you have no privilege of having a political opinion. Those are mine. At times, because I'm a debater, I miss it. But I am much more liberated by that reality that I don't have the privilege of letting this turmoil be created in me. Because what will become the testimony? It becomes the testimony. And I can't imagine that that's a testimony I would want. But it took him making it so clear that by this action I'm taking, by this step that I'm placing in you, you have no right to a political opinion or to a political side. Because I'm going to take you to as far left as I can take you, and I'm going to take you as far right as I can take you. And you're going to love both ends of this. And if you make judgments or assessments that are not from me, you're going to resist one or the other. Nope. So he remedied it for me. I have no right to a political opinion. And a young man that loved political science and took it as his major, and God gave this ability to argue or debate with the voice he gave me and to quiet it all. Been quite different. But I watch this happen so fast. The anger that builds, I mean, it erupts because of political opinion. And God's saying, that me? That look like me? The answer is, for me, no, it doesn't.
Hey, Randy,
Yes.
something just kind of came to me because I'm an arguer as well, but as a debater, you have to see both sides. You have to be able to recognize both sides and be able to look at both sides. And that's kind of where he's taken you. It's not so much about the arguing to be right or left or right, whatever, but just to be able to see both sides.
Yeah, but he won't let me do that.
No.
No. It was dialed to zero.
Wow.
And we don't know much to talk about it.
Wow.
I didn't say that.
No, or where you get to talk about the things that are really important. I'm working on it.
Well, it has been interesting even within our close family because things are said and when it's met by my silence, it's unusual because kind of what I've shared with y'all before. I learned this, Mayor. I learned it very quickly when somebody would call me on the phone and start telling me their problem. If I would just kind of even acknowledging that I heard, or if it was in person nodding my head, the story became, well, Randy was on my side. So you had to learn not to even nod your head. Well, sometimes in those responses we give opinion, and sometimes there's just not one, and it has become a tense point when I don't have one.
Well, maybe you have them, just not voice it.
Maybe so. I don't have.
Maybe because he's flattened it in you. It's not really something you ponder over anymore.
I give it very little time.
And so you're not wasting your time and energy
Well, yeah,
to do that. And so there's not really any.
and I'm not even saying that others need to do it. He quieted it in me. And I do know why, because if he sends, the instruction he gave now 13 years ago was, I'm going to send you the worst of the worst. I'm going to send you the most broken. You cannot approach that from an opinion. So it's different. But because all of those things are done because there's a standard running in our head. That we have a standard that we have formed in our head about the way things should be, the things that are right, the things that are wrong. We've formed those, and those rulers exist. And when something's coming against one of those standards of measurement, it creates immense emotion. And God's saying, I didn't give you privilege to have a ruler. And that's hard. That's a hard word in this world today. You don't have a right to a ruler. Because whose spirit's in me now? Who do I belong to? Do we not believe those scriptures? Am I not bought with a price? Did my life not go away? We talked about this a few weeks ago. What is salvation? Salvation is Angela laying on that table, dead. No breath in her. Dead. There's a heart there, there's a mind there, there's blood vessels there, there's lungs there, there's muscle there. Everything as Adam was formed and laying on the ground, everything was there, lacking one thing, his breath. So that if she's laying here and there's no air in her, no breath in her, zero, and he breathes life into her, whose life does it have to be? It has to be his. It's now his spirit that's running through this brain, that's beating this heart, that's controlling what these hands do, controlling what these feet do. It's him in us. And I can tell you, most don't want it. They don't want to surrender to that point to where they're willing to let him be life. And it's robbing us. Because he didn't design that to make us give stuff up. He designed it that way because there now is the richest, the most dynamic, the most blessed life we could possibly have. It's not second rate. It's not second hand. It is the best. He knew it would be the best, or he wouldn't have done it. If there would have been a better way to restore us, a better way to redeem us, a better way to give us life, he would have done it. He didn't give us second best. He knew that if this was going to work, we had to die. Go back and listen about 3 or 4 weeks ago when we taught on this subject. Salvation isn't about him accepting me the way I was. Salvation is about making sure that I was dead. Knew I was dead. The wage of sin is death. So the very life that beats in me is his. So the testimony that I share by the life that I now live has made the world wonder who in the world is this man named Jesus if he's living in these people and they're standing and they're calling him by his name, and this is the behavior that they display. We don't have the privilege of having a ruler. We don't get to measure. Go back and read, study this, 2 Corinthians chapter 10. Look at this passage. It's powerful. Let's just read just a little bit more. Let's just continue. We ended in 12, but let's go a little bit more. But we will not boast of things without measure, but according to the measure of the rule which God has distributed to us, a measure to reach even unto you. For we stretch not ourselves because beyond our measure, as though we reach not unto you, for we are come as far as to you also in preaching the gospel of Christ, not boasting of things without measure, that is, of other men's labors, but having hope, when your faith is increased, that we shall be enlarged by you, according to our rule abundantly, to preach the gospel in the regions beyond you, and not to boast in any other man's line of things made ready to our hand. But he that glories, let him glory in the Lord. For not he that commends himself is approved, but whom the Lord commends. It's not our comparisons. It's not our assessment. It's not our measure. It's the measure we were given. That is the Holy Spirit. That's the measure we were given. It's not a standard that we try to meet. It's a surrender so that the measure is only one thing. We in industry, we would call these gates. In forming a contract, unless these gates were met, we wouldn't go any further. Well, the gate in the Christian life is simple. None of this works if we don't die to let him live. None of it works. Because until that happens, until those things that are formed within ourselves die, he will not live. We've missed the point of salvation. He becomes his own standard. He's the cause of his own effect. He's the result of his own effort. Christ in us, the hope of glory. Father, I thank you today. You just helped me sort things out, to see some things I'd never seen before. I'd never really seen the difference between comparison and measurement. But we watch around us the critical spirit, and we watch around us the negative spirit. And now, Father, I realize by what you've shown or what you've revealed today is that one comes from comparison, the other comes from measuring. And we don't have approval to do either. We don't boast. We don't compare. We don't hold up or lift up. We don't tear down. We each day let you live through us so that your light, your breath, your joy, your peace, your love, your kindness is on display to those around us every day. And it doesn't come easily if we measure first and then try to be kind second. Kindness, Father, we know, according to what you've revealed now, has to rule the day. And rarely will we be kind if we've measured first. Do they deserve it or do they not? Kindness is rarely found when it's preceded by measurement. We saw it, Father, with Jesus and the woman caught in adultery. There was no measurement. There was no assessment of her. And the kindness came because there was no measurement. So we thank you, Father, for the clarity of what you're trying to show us. And I pray, Father, that each one of us would receive it and to go beyond where we currently are. It's not an easy step, but to go beyond what we currently know and where we currently are in each life. As you mature us and as we grow, to each day recognize, Father, that this isn't my day. These aren't my minutes. These aren't my hours. These aren't my hands. These aren't my feet. This isn't my mouth to speak with, Father. It truly is yours. You bought it. You paid the price. We agreed to that when we became your child. We agreed that that's the way this is going to work. Not to our detriment, but to our edification, to our building up. Not so that you could minimize us, but so that you could effectively work through us. So, Father, thank you for what you're showing. Thank you for what you're teaching. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.